The crystalline council chambers of Nexus Prime gleamed in the light of 3 distant suns. 12 alien delegates of varied physiologies sat in a semicircle of floating chairs, their forms as diverse as the worlds they represented. Some were humanoid, others far removed from bipedal anatomy, tentacled, furred, scaled, or composed of energy contained in environmental suits. Ambassador Jake Morrison of Earth stood at the center of the chamber, datapad in hand. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, his diplomatic uniform crisp despite 18 months of fruitless negotiations. Beside him, his aide Lisa Hayes maintained perfect posture, stylus poised over her own device, ready to record yet another session of condescension and dismissal. Jake drew a deep breath. This time would be different. It had to be. "Esteemed members of the Galaxy Council," he began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Earth extends its gratitude for this opportunity to present our proposal for a joint Human Council task force to protect the trade routes in the Orion Arm from raiders." A ripple of dismissive gestures passed through several delegates. The blue-tentacled Thesara leaned toward the furred General Wook, whispering something that caused both to emit sounds resembling laughter. Jake continued undeterred, activating a holographic display from his datapad. "Our analysis of raider activity shows a 37% increase in attacks on commercial vessels in the past standard year. The economic impact affects not only Earth colonies, but Council worlds as well." The hologram rotated, showing star systems, trade routes, and attack patterns highlighted in red. Jake had spent weeks compiling this data, working with Earth's best analysts to create an irrefutable case for cooperation. What Earth proposes is a coordinated patrol system using both human and Council vessels, positioned at these key junctures. The hologram shifted to show strategic points along the trade routes. "Our simulations indicate this approach would reduce successful raids by approximately 83%, while requiring minimal resource allocation from participating worlds." Chancellor Vexar, a tall, gaunt alien with silver-blue skin that rippled with bioluminescent patterns, rose from his central position. His movement silenced the murmurs among the delegates. "Ambassador Morrison." Vexar's voice was smooth, but carried an undercurrent of patronizing amusement. "Once again, Earth demonstrates its enthusiasm and its naivety." Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lisa's stylus pressed harder against her screen. "The Galaxy Council has maintained peace across 17 sectors for over 3,000 years," Vexar continued, spreading his long, 6-fingered hands. "We have developed systems and protocols that function harmoniously, precisely because they are not disrupted by the impulsive actions of younger species." Thesara's tentacles writhed in apparent agreement. "Earth has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, she added. "The complexities of interstellar diplomacy require experience Earth simply lacks." General Wook, his fur bristling with poorly concealed derision, leaned forward. "These raiders you speak of, they are drawn to human vessels precisely because your security protocols are inadequate. Your military vessels are—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Toys compared to Council protectors." Jake felt heat rising in his chest, but maintained his diplomatic demeanor. "With respect, General, our data indicates that Council worlds suffer nearly as many attacks as human colonies. The Bendis agricultural shipments lost last month." "We're an anomaly," interrupted Thesara, a reptilian delegate whose scales shifted color with her mood. Currently, they were a haughty bronze. One that would not have occurred had the Council's recommendation for increased security been implemented. Jake tapped his datapad, bringing up new figures. The Council's recommended security measures would have required resources equivalent to 40% of Bendis's annual production. That's economically unsustainable for a developing colony. Chancellor Vexar raised a hand, silencing further debate. "Ambassador Morrison, You misunderstand the fundamental relationship between Earth and the Galaxy Council. We are not peers. We are not equals. His skin rippled with patterns that conveyed superiority to those who could read such signals. Earth is a young world, a child in a cosmos of ancients. Children must crawl before they can walk, and walk before they can run. The chamber fell silent. Jake felt Lisa tense beside him. "What exactly are you suggesting, Chancellor?" Jake asked, his voice carefully controlled. Disara spoke before Vexar could respond. "What the Council proposes is not a joint task force, but protection. All human colonies would be placed under the direct jurisdiction of the Council Defense Forces." Jake's fingers tightened around his datapad. "And Earth's military assets would be incorporated into the Council fleet," General Wook said with obvious satisfaction. "Under proper supervision, of course." "In other words," Jake said slowly, "Earth surrenders its sovereignty in exchange for your protection." "Not surrender," Chancellor Vexar corrected smoothly. "Guidance, tutelage, as is appropriate for a species of your developmental stage." Jake stood motionless for several long seconds, a realization dawning that sent ice through his veins. The Council had never intended to treat humans as equals. 18 months of proposals, concessions, and diplomacy had been an exercise in futility. The Council didn't want partners. They wanted subjects. He looked at Lisa, whose eyes conveyed a silent message. She had been recording every slight, every dismissal, every condescending remark for a year and a half. The evidence was overwhelming. Jake closed his datapad with a decisive zip that echoed through the silent chamber. The sound carried a finality that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "Chancellor Vexar, esteemed delegates of the Galaxy Council," Jake said, his voice now carrying a weight and authority that commanded attention. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I must inform you that we are withdrawing from these peace talks, effective immediately." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. Chancellor Vexar's bioluminescence flickered with confusion. "Ambassador Morrison," he began, "this is a highly irregular—" "We came to you as equals," Jake continued, cutting off the Chancellor. "We came with data, with proposals, with a genuine desire for mutual cooperation. Instead, we've been treated as children playing with toys we don't understand." He gathered his materials, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Earth will find its own path forward. We withdraw not only from these talks, but from all non-essential interactions with Council worlds. Human specialists, technicians, and support personnel will be recalled to Earth space within the week." "This is absurd," General Wook sputtered. "You cannot simply—" "We can, and we will," Jake replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Perhaps when the Council is ready to engage with humanity as equals, we can revisit this conversation." With that, Jake nodded to Lisa, and they turned toward the chamber's exit. Behind them, the Council erupted into chaotic debate, but Jake didn't look back. His mind was already racing forward to the implications of what he'd just done, and to the contingency plans that would now go into effect. As they reached the transport bay, Lisa finally spoke. "They'll never take us seriously now." Jake's expression was grim, but determined. "They will, just not in the way they expected." 3 days later, Chancellor Vexar's private office was in chaos. Holographic displays crowded the space, each showing different reports of rapidly escalating crises across Council space. 14 trading vessels have gone silent in the Calyx sector, reported Cathron, the head of Council intelligence. The Zarian's normally composed demeanor was cracking, his skin taking on a sickly green hue. "And we've received reports of communication blackouts on 3 border worlds." Vexar paced the length of his office, his silver-blue skin now pale with stress. "What of the human withdrawal? Are they truly recalling all personnel?" Catherine activated a new holographic display. "Without exception. medical teams from Thyris Prime, agricultural scientists from Bendis and Thymos, engineers from Kepler Station, all departing on human transport ships. "This is madness," Vexar muttered. "They're only hurting themselves." Council markets represent 70% of human exports. Catherine hesitated before responding. "Chancellor, there's more." He manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a new series of images. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalies." The hologram shifted to show vast structures hidden in the shadow of a gas giant in human-controlled space. Even to Vexar's untrained eye, they were clearly shipyards, enormous ones, far larger than anything the Council had believed humans capable of building. "What am I looking at?" Vexar demanded, though dread was already pooling in his gut. "Human warships," Thrawn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Capital ships, dreadnoughts, carriers, at least 10 times larger than any vessels we previously attributed to Earth's fleet." "Impossible," Vexar breathed. "Our intelligence reports—" "Were incomplete," Cathron finished. "Or deliberately misled." He adjusted the display again, showing production facilities that stretched for kilometers. "Based on our analysis, these yards are producing ships at a rate that would allow humans to double their visible fleet every 3 standard months." Vexar sank into his chair, the implications washing over him like a cold wave. "How long have these facilities existed?" "Based on the development stage and surrounding infrastructure." Cathron hesitated. "At least 5 years, possibly longer." "5 years," Vexar repeated numbly. "And we never detected them." "Chancellor," Thrawn said, his tone grave, "I believe we must consider the possibility that human technological capabilities substantially exceed our estimates. These facilities employ stealth technologies that our sensors weren't calibrated to detect." Before Vexar could respond, his communication array chimed with an urgent signal. The holographic face of Sith Ara, the reptilian delegate who had been so dismissive of Jake Morrison's proposal, appeared. Her scales had shifted to a panicked orange. "Chancellor, Kepler Station has gone dark." "What do you mean, dark?" Vexar demanded. "The human engineers, they didn't just leave. They disabled the primary systems." Sith Ara's voice rose with barely contained hysteria. "Navigation, life support, power regulation all offline. We have over 20,000 Council citizens stranded there, and without the human-designed maintenance protocols—" "Find someone who can restart the systems," Vexar ordered. "That's just it," Sith Ara hissed. "The systems were designed and built by humans. Our technicians don't understand the integration pathways. They estimate it could take months to reverse engineer the controls. And by then—" The communication abruptly cut off. Vexar looked to Thrawn, whose expression confirmed his worst fears. "It's not just Kepler Station," the intelligence chief said quietly. "Reports are coming in from across Council space. On Mechanus, the power grids are failing without human maintenance crews. On Thyris Prime, the plague that human medical teams were containing is spreading again." Vexar's bioluminescence dimmed with mounting horror. "How did we become so dependent on them without realizing it?" Catherine had no answer. In the following weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The Council convened emergency sessions daily, but solutions remained elusive. Human specialists had quietly integrated themselves into critical infrastructure across dozens of worlds, and their sudden absence left gaping holes that Council experts scrambled to fill. General Wook, who had so recently mocked human military capabilities, now found himself tasked with leading a diplomatic mission to Earth. His flagship, the Eternal Glory, was the pride of the Council fleet, a massive vessel whose weapon systems had never been defeated in combat. "Your objective is simple," Chancellor Vexar told Wook in a private briefing. "Demonstrate Council strength while extending an olive branch. Make it clear that while we're willing to reconsider certain aspects of our relationship with Earth, The fundamental hierarchy must remain intact. General Wook, his fur now meticulously groomed for the historic mission, nodded confidently. Humans respond to shows of force. Once they see the eternal glory in orbit around their homeworld, they'll understand the futility of their position. The eternal glory departed with great ceremony, accompanied by a squadron of council warships. Their journey to the Sol system would take approximately 10 standard days at maximum speed. They never reached Earth. At the border of human-controlled space, a single vessel awaited them. Compared to the eternal glory, it appeared almost modest in size, sleek, white, with blue markings identifying it as the UEE's Guardian. Human vessel, General Wook transmitted, his tone conveying appropriate superiority. This is General Wook of the Galaxy Council, aboard the flagship Eternal Glory. We come on a diplomatic mission to Earth. You will escort us to your homeworld. There was a brief pause before a response came through. The holographic display showed a human female in a crisp military uniform, her dark hair pulled back tightly. General Wook, this is Captain Nina Rodriguez of the UEE's Guardian. I regret to inform you that your vessel is not authorized to enter human space at this time. Wook's fur bristled with indignation. Not authorized? We are the Galaxy Council. We do not require authorization to... You misunderstand, General. Captain Rodriguez interrupted, her expression impassive. This isn't a negotiation. Your vessel will power down weapon systems and remain at this position, or you will be prevented from proceeding. Wook turned to his weapons officer, not bothering to mute the transmission. Target their engines. A single shot should disable them without destruction. We need merely demonstrate. I wouldn't advise that, General, Rodriguez said, still calm. But the choice is yours. Wook ignored her, giving the order to fire. The Eternal Glory's main cannon charged, targeting systems locked on the Guardian's engine section. What happened next would be debated in Council strategic sessions for years to come. Before the Eternal Glory could fire, pinpoint energy beams from the Guardian struck the Council flagship at 12 precisely calculated locations. The weapon systems went offline simultaneously, leaving the massive vessel suddenly defenseless. Not a single Council crew member was injured. Not one secondary system was affected. Only the offensive capabilities had been neutralized, with surgical precision that stunned even the most experienced Council military officers. As I said, Captain Rodriguez's voice came through again. You are not authorized to enter human space. A transport vessel will arrive shortly to take a single diplomat to Earth, should you wish to send one. The rest of your fleet will remain here under Guardian supervision. The transmission ended. General Wook stood in stunned silence on his command deck, the impossible reality sinking in. Somehow, the humans had neutralized the Council's most powerful vessel without firing a single destructive shot. The incident with the Eternal Glory was merely the first of many similar encounters. 2 more Council diplomatic missions attempted to penetrate human space in the following months. Each was intercepted by small contingents of human vessels that demonstrated the same overwhelming technological superiority. Perfect sensor awareness, weapons that disabled rather than destroyed, and an unmistakable message. Humans no longer recognized Council authority. Meanwhile, Council intelligence continued to uncover disturbing information. Humans hadn't been isolating themselves during their decades of supposed integration with galactic society. Instead, they had been quietly building alliances with non-Council species, the Drain Alliance, the Free Colonies, the Independent Systems Federation. Treaties of trade, defense, and technology sharing had been signed without the Council's knowledge or approval. They've created a parallel diplomatic network, Thrawn reported to an increasingly haggard Chancellor Vexar. While officially participating in Council talks, they were simultaneously establishing direct relationships with dozens of worlds. Vexar stared at the holographic map showing the extent of human diplomatic initiatives. How did our intelligence miss this? Catherine's skin darkened with what might have been embarrassment. That's the most concerning part, Chancellor. They didn't hide these alliances. They conducted them openly, but through channels our analysts deemed insignificant. Insignificant, Vexar echoed. Cultural exchanges, academic conferences, trade expositions, Thrawn explained. We monitored official diplomatic channels, while they built relationships through civil society, private enterprise, and scientific collaboration. The intelligence chief hesitated before activating another holographic file. There's worse news. We've discovered evidence that human surveillance technology has penetrated Council communications networks. They've likely been reading our classified data for years. Vexar's bioluminescence flickered with alarm. Is there any way to secure our systems? That's just it, Thrawn said quietly. The encryption protocols we use were developed with human assistance decades ago. They likely built backdoors from the beginning. The full implications hit Vexar like a physical blow. Humans knew Council military deployments, supply lines, defense strategies, information the Council had no way to conceal because the very systems they used for security had been compromised from their inception. 6 months after Earth's withdrawal from the peace talks, the Galaxy Council was in crisis. Trade disruptions had led to resource shortages on multiple worlds. The hegemony conflict, which human mediators had been on the verge of resolving, had erupted into full-scale war. The plague on Thyrus Prime had spread to neighboring systems, despite quarantine efforts. In a private session with his most trusted advisors, Chancellor Vexar finally acknowledged what had become increasingly clear. The Council needed humans far more than humans needed the Council. We have no choice, he said, his once commanding voice now tired and resigned. We must extend a formal invitation for Earth to rejoin the galactic community, on their terms. Ambassador Quindar of the Valderus Confederation was selected for the delicate mission. As a member of a species known for diplomacy and composed negotiation, he was the Council's best hope for salvaging some dignity from the situation. Remember, Vexar instructed him before departure, you represent not just the Council, but 3,000 years of galactic stability. Make Earth understand that while we are willing to make concessions, certain fundamental principles must be maintained. Quindar nodded, his silver skin reflecting the dim light of the chamber. I understand, Chancellor. I will make our position clear while extending the hand of reconciliation. The journey to Earth was tense. Quindar traveled in a small diplomatic vessel, deliberately choosing a modest approach rather than the show of force that had failed so spectacularly for General Wook. As his ship approached the border of human space near the Sol system, he prepared himself for the intercept that would surely come. What he wasn't prepared for was the scale of what awaited him. Not one vessel, but hundreds, perhaps thousands. A vast armada of sleek white warships and massive cargo vessels moving in perfect harmony, conducting maneuvers with precision that seemed impossible for such large fleet formations. Quindar's pilot, a veteran of numerous diplomatic missions, whispered in awe, "By the ancient stars!" A transmission came through. Ambassador Quindar, this is Admiral Scott Peterson of the Terran Alliance Navy. Welcome to human space. You are cleared to proceed to Luna Base under escort. Please follow the designated flight path exactly. As Quindar's vessel moved deeper into human territory, escorted by ships that dwarfed his own, the true extent of human infrastructure became apparent. Orbital platforms, defense installations, and shipyards stretched as far as the eye could see. Construction bots swarmed around partially completed vessels, each larger and more advanced than anything in the Council fleet. By the time they reached Earth's moon, Quindar had been rendered nearly speechless. Luna Base was not the modest facility Council intelligence had described. It was a colossal complex spanning much of the lunar surface, with subsurface components that sensors couldn't even penetrate. Quindar was escorted to a conference room with a view of Earth hanging in the void, beautiful and serene. He waited, gathering his thoughts, preparing the careful speech he had rehearsed throughout the journey. The door slid open. "Ambassador Quindar," a familiar voice said. "Thank you for coming." Quindar turned, expecting to meet some high-ranking human diplomat. Instead, he found himself face to face with Admiral Jake Morrison, the same man who, 6 months earlier, had been Earth's humble ambassador to the Council. "Ambassador Morrison," Quindar began, then corrected himself. "Admiral Morrison, I was not aware of your change in position." Jake smiled slightly. "There have been many changes. Ambassador, please, sit. We have much to discuss." As they took their seats, Quindar noticed that Jake now carried himself with an unmistakable authority. Gone was the patient diplomat who had endured council condescension. In his place sat a confident military leader who clearly had no intention of pleading for anything. "Chancellor Vexar sends his regards," Quindar began carefully. "The Council recognizes that recent events have created unfortunate tensions between our peoples. We wish to extend an invitation for Earth to resume its participation in the peace talks, with certain adjustments to the framework that we believe will address your concerns." Jake regarded him steadily. "What adjustments did you have in mind?" Quindar outlined the Council's proposal: a special status for Earth, increased representation in certain committees, a joint task force to address the issues with raiders that Jake had originally proposed. When he finished, Jake was silent for a moment. Then he activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. "This," he said, indicating the complex three-dimensional map, "is the current state of what we now call the Terran Alliance. 37 worlds and independent systems that have chosen to align themselves with Earth's vision of galactic cooperation." Quindar stared at the display, recognizing many worlds that the Council had long considered inconsequential: small colonies, minor trading posts, systems with limited resources. Together, however, they formed a network that encompassed nearly a quarter of known space. "While the Council was dismissing us as children," Jake continued, "we were building relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests. The Drain Alliance joined us because we helped them develop sustainable energy sources without demanding political concessions. The Free Colonies partnered with us because we provided medical technology without requiring them to surrender autonomy." He adjusted the display, zooming in on Earth's orbital shipyards. "This single facility produces 150 new combat vessels per month. We have 6 such facilities operating throughout the Alliance." Quindar felt a cold realization spreading through him. The Council had not simply underestimated human military capability. They had fundamentally misunderstood humanity's approach to galactic politics. "What are you saying, Admiral?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. Jake deactivated the hologram and met Quindar's eyes directly. "The Galaxy Council's time as the dominant force in this region of space is over. Ambassador, you have 2 choices. You can dissolve the Council and petition to join the Terran Alliance as equal partners, or you can maintain your isolation while we continue to expand." "Join?" Quindar repeated, struggling to comprehend. "You're suggesting that the Council, with its 3,000 years of history, should subordinate itself to a human-led alliance?" "Not subordinate," Jake corrected. "Join as equals. The same offer we extend to all our partners. No hierarchies based on age or tradition. Only mutual respect and cooperation." "And if we refuse?" Jake's expression remained neutral. "Then nothing changes immediately. You'll continue to face the challenges you're currently experiencing: resource shortages, technological gaps, social unrest. Meanwhile, the Alliance will grow stronger. Eventually, the member worlds of the Council will make their own decisions about where their futures lie." He rose from his seat, indicating that the meeting was concluded. "You have 1 standard month to deliver your response. Ambassador, I suggest you use the time wisely." Quindar returned to Nexus Prime under human escort, his silver skin tinged with ash-white shock. Throughout the journey, he replayed the conversation with Admiral Morrison in his mind, searching for some negotiating leverage, some angle he had missed. There was none. He arrived bearing not a plea for Earth's return, but an invitation for the Council to surrender its authority, a complete inversion of the relationship the Council had always assumed would exist. Emergency sessions were convened immediately upon his return. The 12 delegates gathered in the crystal chamber that had once seemed so impressive, but now felt oddly fragile. Chancellor Vexar, his skin pale and his movements slowed by exhaustion, called the session to order. Ambassador Quindar has returned from Earth with the humans' response to our invitation, he announced. I ask you all to listen carefully and consider our options with the gravity this situation demands. Quindar described his journey in detail, the vast human fleets, the orbital infrastructure, the confident demeanor of Admiral Morrison. When he delivered the ultimatum, the chamber erupted into chaos. Dissolve the Council? After 3 millennia? Thesara's tentacles writhed with indignation. This is beyond insulting. It's not just insulting, it's impossible, added another delegate. Our worlds have existed under Council guidance since before humans discovered fire. General Wook, considerably humbled since his encounter with the UEE's Guardian, spoke more soberly. We must consider the practical realities. My flagship, the most advanced vessel in our fleet, was disabled by a single human ship that could have destroyed us but chose not to. What does that tell us about their capabilities and their restraint?
It tells us they are dangerous, Thesara shot back. All the more reason not to capitulate to their demands.
The debate raged for hours, then days. Reports continued to flood in from across Council space, systems failing, conflicts escalating, economies destabilizing. Without human specialists, without access to the trade networks that the Terran Alliance now controlled, the once mighty Council found itself increasingly paralyzed. A week into the deliberations, a delegation arrived from Thyrus Prime, a world ravaged by plague and now facing complete societal collapse. The Council speaks of pride and tradition, their representative said, her voice weak from illness, but filled with conviction. My people speak of survival. If joining this Terran Alliance means our children will live, then our choice is clear. Similar sentiments began to emerge from other worlds, Bendis and Thymos, facing food shortages without human agricultural expertise, formally petitioned to leave the Council and seek Alliance membership independently. The industrial world of Mechanus, its production facilities operating at less than 30% capacity without human-designed power systems, followed suit. Chancellor Vexar watched as the foundation of the Council crumbled beneath him. 3,000 years of tradition and authority, dissolving in a matter of months, all because they had dismissed a young species as unworthy of equal treatment. Finally, after 3 weeks of increasingly desperate debate, Vexar called for a final vote. We face an unprecedented choice, he told the assembled delegates, his voice heavy with the weight of history. Maintain our pride and watch our civilization decline, or embrace change and preserve what matters most, the well-being of our peoples. The vote was not unanimous, but the outcome was clear. The Galaxy Council would formally petition to join the Terran Alliance, acknowledging centuries of arrogance and committing to a new era of genuine cooperation. As delegates filed out of the chamber, General Wook approached Chancellor Vexar. Do you think the humans planned this from the beginning? He asked quietly. Vexar's bioluminescence flickered with sad resignation. No. I think they genuinely wanted to work with us as partners. We forced their hand by treating them as inferiors. And now they hold all the power, Wook observed. Perhaps, Vexar replied. Or perhaps they've shown us a better way to wield it. 1 month after Quindar's meeting with Admiral Morrison, representatives from the Galaxy Council and the Terran Alliance gathered on Luna for a historic ceremony. The crystalline chamber had been replaced by a simple, circular room where all participants sat at the same level, a physical manifestation of the principle of equality that would govern the new relationship. Admiral Morrison, still in his military uniform but now bearing the additional title of Alliance Diplomatic Liaison, stood to address the gathering. Today marks not the end of one era and the beginning of another, but the merging of two traditions, he said. The wisdom and experience of the Council worlds, combined with the innovation and adaptability of the Alliance. Together, we face challenges that neither could overcome alone. Raiders threatening our trade routes, plagues devastating our populations, conflicts disrupting our shared peace. Chancellor Vexar, officially the last leader of the Galaxy Council, and soon to be one voice among many in the Alliance Council, rose to speak in response. "We come to this table humbled," he acknowledged, his skin patterns conveying sincerity to those who could read them. "For too long, we mistook age for wisdom and tradition for truth. We failed to recognize that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation." As the ceremony proceeded, and the founding charter of the expanded alliance was signed, few noticed the small group of hardline traditionalists who observed from the back of the chamber. Led by an aide to Thesara, these representatives from Nexus Prime had already begun quietly organizing to preserve what they saw as the essential sovereignty of the former Council worlds. Their whispered conversations spoke of resistance, of maintaining the true hierarchy beneath a veneer of cooperation. They were few, and their resources limited, but their conviction was absolute. The old order would not fade without a fight. For now, though, a new chapter in galactic history had begun. Humans and former Council species worked side by side to address the crises that had emerged during their separation. Human medical teams returned to Thyrus Prime with advanced treatments for the plague. Council cultural specialists shared millennia of artistic and philosophical traditions with eager human scholars. Joint military patrols, led by both human and alien commanders, secured the trade routes that sustained them all. And in Earth orbit, the massive shipyards that had once produced vessels of war began construction on a new flagship, the Harmony, designed by both human and Council engineers as a symbol of their shared future. Admiral Jake Morrison, watching the construction from his office window on Luna Base, reflected on the long journey from dismissed diplomat to architect of a new galactic order. Beside him stood Lisa Hayes, still his trusted aide, though now she advised on alliance integration rather than recording Council insults. "Do you think it will last?" she asked, nodding toward the partially constructed Harmony. Jake considered the question seriously. "Not without effort, not without vigilance. There are still those who cling to old hierarchies, both among former Council worlds and within our own ranks." "But worth fighting for?" Jake smiled, remembering the moment he had closed his datapad in the Council chamber, making the decision that had changed everything. "Absolutely," he said. "A galaxy where cooperation replaces condescension, where species are judged by their actions rather than their age. That's a future worth building, one day at a time." Below them, Earth turned serenely in the void. No longer a isolated world striving for recognition, but the heart of an alliance that stretched across the stars. An alliance founded not on dominance, but on the radical proposition that even the youngest species might have something to teach the oldest. The Galaxy Council had learned its lesson, though not in the way it had expected. In dismissing humanity as children playing with dangerous toys, they had failed to see that sometimes it is the children who show the way forward.